So the point of this panel is to discuss leadership and the challenges of being a CEO. I know there are a lot of startup founders and executives out there in the audience that are eager to hear from this esteemed panel of CEOs. The title of this thing is called Is It Lonely at the Top? So let me just start with that. Is it lonely at the top, and how do you combat that?
Yeah.
So I think yes and no. You have a lot of friends that emerge that you didn't know about, so in that sense, or that you had forgotten about. So in that sense, no. But anytime you're in a position where your experience is unique and there's really not that many people around you who've gone through it, it definitely can be lonely. And not a lot of people appreciate it. They think that it's, something that's all good things and that there's not stress and other things that come with it. So sometimes that can be a little tough.
Yeah, so I was Chief Operating Officer before for Booking, and then I became the CEO for Booking.com. At first I thought, well, how difficult can it be, right? How different can it be? But it is a big difference when you still have somebody there above you when suddenly you're the person that needs to do that. I don't think it's lonely at the top because it all depends on the culture you create. I think it's very important that you create a culture of empowerment where people are allowed to make decisions, and that you also create a culture of failure. And if you create that culture, then it's much more open, and I don't think it doesn't create loneliness because you're allowed to discuss failures, successes, and then I think to me it's about creating a team and not to think that you can be the best at everything. And that's something that I learned to let go as well, because if you let go of that and find the people around you that together you can build a more successful company, that to me has been crucial. And then also you operate much more as a team.
Mm-hmm. José? Got some fans of Booking.com out there.
Well, I think it's definitely one of the loneliest professions in the world. I'm the only founder of Farfetch, so I had the idea and decided to start on my own. And but independently, whether you're the founder or whether you're the CEO, the truth is, the most difficult decisions will escalate all the way up. And if the decisions were easy, or if the data was clear, they probably wouldn't escalate. Someone would have made those decisions before. And at that moment in time where data is not perfect and you don't know the variables, and of course you listen to everyone in the team, but in the end someone has to call the shots, it is a very lonely moment. And to Gillian's point is how do you counter that with a company culture that is inclusive, in our case, culture and values are really important. I think for every startup out there, but we work very hard on maintaining that, and that feeling that we're all in this together, we really try to invest on it. So we actually, everyone on Farfetch is on a stock option program, for example. So so any level, whether they just started or whether they've been in the company for long, and hopefully that makes us feel that we're all together in that journey and counter the loneliness factor.
Jason, you're a sole founder as well, correct?
I have two co-founders.
Oh, okay.
So I'm lucky I don't have that same issue.
Okay, so you had some friends along the way. Do you, José, do you ever wish that you had started with a co-founder? Would that have made it easier?
It is what it is. So I don't even stop to think. But it's the other thing is you're always on stage. So if you're the CEO, or if you're part of the executive team, what you say, by the water cooler, or to press, or to investors, or to anyone in the company, is really listened to and taken seriously, and that sometimes can feel a bit. It is definitely you need to be careful with communication and learn that communication is essential in companies.
Jason, you've had to take your company through a lot of rocky moments. There have been numerous legal battles. There was a merger with your number one rival that didn't really materialize. I'm sure that communicating with your team throughout all of that was challenging. What leadership lessons have you learned throughout the roller coaster?
Certainly, I'm a glutton for punishment. You're right about that. No, I think that really it's the same as any of the early challenges you face. You just always have to be looking forward, and you have to tackle each thing as though this is just another business problem we have to solve. And I think that while some of the comments made are true as well in tackling a problem like that you want to create an inclusive culture, you want a lot of viewpoints. Also, what you said, that all the difficult decisions, or the most difficult ones, end up coming to you. And in that case, there's just, when you're going through something like that, there's just a constant stream of difficult decisions. You have to make one after the other. But I think if you do it well, people gain confidence in you. When you go in front of the team and you tell them this is what we're going to do, and these are the ways that we're going to approach it, and this is how we're going to be successful, and then you go out and do it, there's a tremendous benefit to that. That buys you more than anything you could have possibly said in a different sort of experience where things aren't going well. And people are paying more attention, so the stakes are higher too, and I think that makes a big difference in how people view you. And for me, at least, it was about being transparent, making sure I had constant communication. So when we were going through the most difficult challenges, every week, sometimes more than once a week, getting in front of the whole company and explaining what was going on, and then not being afraid to make the tough decisions and to stand behind them and to explain to people why, even when they didn't go well, why they were made that way.
Mm-hmm. And this is for the whole panel. Is it possible to be too transparent? Because sometimes I feel like you might actually regret sharing a little bit too much of what's happening behind the scenes with your team or with the media or the public.
I think yes, but I always think it's good to err on the side of transparency. If you go too far, you can adjust back, but it's easier to not be transparent by accident than to be too transparent. So I always try to err on that side.
Mm-hmm. Gillian, earlier you mentioned the fear of failure and how important that is to your organization. What's an example, or maybe you can share some more detail on some times when you've had to encourage your team to be more willing to fail or to take risks?
Yeah, I think if you think about the culture at Booking.com, it's a very entrepreneurial culture, and we do over 1,000 experiments every day. That's how fast we innovate. And you need to have lots of people that come up with ideas, and that you cannot do top down. And that's why we have a bottom-up culture where many people come up with ideas, and then they test with consumers to see if these ideas are actually good for customers. The only thing I realized over time that there's a certain elements of innovation you cannot do bottom-up because they require a huge investment or a change in strategy, etc. And that's where, as a CEO, you play a very important role to free up that road so people can actually come up with ideas that require much more that they can innovate on.
What's
a
an
daily
example
basis.
of one
Well,
of those?
we changed, if you think about Booking, we changed our mission at the beginning of the year, right? We started off in hotels, then we went into accommodations, like the full range. And then at the beginning of the year, we said we want to empower people to experience the world. And we're going to help customers throughout their trip through technology. And because if you think about the change from being more first relevant on a desktop where people could only book, mobile, actually we were traveling with customers. And now you have even more technology which enables us to really help customers in the complete travel journey. So, and that brought a lot of new innovation, which opened up now you can book experiences on Booking.com. We're helping people with transportation, we're helping people planning their holiday, etc. So there's still so much things that we can do for customers even today.
And you're empowering those people even when you're investing lots of money.
Yeah,
it's
great,
a much
but
bigger
it's
risk.
important if you lead a business that it's very clear the purpose, it's very clear what you're trying to accomplish, and then people should find the way themselves. It's very important that you empower them to do that, to learn, and that they're also allowed to make mistakes when they're on this journey, because then as an organization you learn a lot. And I see that in myself as well. I've always been driven by curiosity, and then you keep changing. And it's for me it's super important.
Jose, you've talked about the importance of values and how much that helps in scaling your company from your first employee, yourself, all the way to 2,000. But I'm curious, what does that actually look like in practice? And have you had to shift those values at all over the years?
Well, I started the company without really paying much attention at codifying and verbalizing the values. And actually, that would be my advice to any startup. If you have 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, the values are in the air. You don't really need to stop and to do offsites on what are the values are felt.
And that is really the definition of a company culture, is the kind of decision that you make without having to ask about it.
And then you hit a stage, and in our case was when we were around 120, 150, where you start seeing the cracks because you haven't verbalized, you haven't really expressed in very with absolute clarity what is your culture all about, and what are your values all about. And in our case, the big eye-opener was a very senior hire we've made at the time, and we were pitching ourselves to the candidate. The candidate was pitching to us, and we were so happy that she was joining from this big company and all of that, and it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. She didn't get on with the team at all, and not for lack of skills, nothing skill related, or work ethics. They were impeccable. There was no cultural fit, and that was the moment where we realized we really need to work on this, because we have a great culture, but we're not communicating it when we hire. We're not communicating it internally, and then we did a huge exercise involving the whole company and finding out what makes Farfetch great. And when we, in those moments that defined the big leaps in our company, what values were we demonstrating then? And we worked a lot on them, we wrote them down, and since then it's an exercise we do when we're hiring, when we're doing appraisals, when we're evaluating ourselves. We do constant surveys, and when we look at things like Glassdoor ratings and even how the values transpire to the final customer and to the sellers on our platform and how they see us, and that has become a huge part of running the business.
Mm-hmm. And has that shifted over time? Have your culture, have your values shifted over time at all? Since you
very little.
Mm-hmm.
We added one. We had 5. We have 6 now. But it's they're really, and every time we ask the team, do you feel the values are right? And then everyone says, absolutely, don't touch them. We love them, and which is
all right. So your corporate soul searching exercise was successful then in the beginning.
Yes, definitely. I think you'll find that in most companies that are growing, that to keep growing in harmony and be successful both to consumers and to the other constituents. In our case, we're a marketplace, so our customers are the final customers, but also the brands and the boutiques. And you need to keep that culture and those values very solid.
So I want to put a question out to all of you. How do you combat the temptation, especially as entrepreneurs, but also for you, Gillian, to take on too much personally?
Yeah, so that's something that you have to learn, because and also I think to me it's if you create a culture which accepts failure, then it's actually easier, because then you're not tempted to take a lot personally, because it's in the interest of learning. So that has helped me enormously, and also having 3 kids has helped me not to take things personally, because they keep you busy. So when you tend to forget a lot as well. Yeah,
Guys.
Yeah, no, I think. It depends also on the personality of the CEO. Some are more into the detail, and others are more into the vision. But regardless of your style, you have to let go, and you have to look at at your app and your site, and that, the way things are operating, and not act immediately when sometimes you see a little idea that you would have done differently, but let it go and let it.
But it's your baby. You created this.
I know it's difficult. You have to emotionally, contain yourself, because if not, you're. You can also go down that path and that style of management. That's an option, but it definitely. I don't think it creates an environment where people feel they can be creative, they can fail, and they can. They can change the whole industry and be on all of it together, and that's the environment we want to create. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, it's company by company, and but we talk about extreme delegation. That's what we try to do at Farfetch.
Nice, Jason.
No, both of you brought up a great point. I think you're right. It depends on the personality of the CEO. I'm not a details person, so I actually.
So it's easy for you.
I enjoy when I can let go of things. I'm a little tough, I think, afterwards if the result's not good, but I think that's somewhere you do want to be more involved, is holding people accountable. I also worked for almost a decade in corporate, so for me, the experience of learning not to be too involved and how to let go of things, I first learned when I started managing people in corporate. Because managing people at a big company is no different. You feel accountable for the results of the team, and you want to be in charge of it, but you also want to make sure that it's done right, and that the people working for you understand your vision and how you want it to come about. And so it's really the same thing, and I learned there very early that you just cannot achieve success if you try to do everything yourself. You just can't. So by the time I started the company and really started to staff up employees, it was just sort of a given for me. I knew I'd have to let go. I think it was hard to figure out the pace at which and how to let the right things go, and how to know what to delegate. But that's just a business challenge. I think that's different from feeling a need to hold on to things.
And one more question. So how do you stay focused on the day-to-day goals while also plotting for big long-term future opportunities? I know that's a big balance.
I think for the CEO, you should be very focused on the latter. Let your team figure out how to manage the day-to-day goals. You want to set the goals, so up front you help them set the goals, and then hopefully from there you can spend the vast majority of your time creating new opportunities. I forget who it was. I think it was maybe McKinsey put together a framework where they said, operators, there was like a 3-part thing, and on the last 2 of them, it was operators go after objectives, and then the last one was visionaries create paths. And I think that's what the CEO should be doing. You mentioned creating a path earlier. Where are the places we're going to invest and focus? Why? How do I create the right strategy around it? How do I know where the world's going and get us there first? I spend much more of my time trying to figure out what other companies are doing and where the consumer trends are going than I do focused on our day-to-day goals.
Gillian, was that a big shift for you, going from the operator role to the visionary?
Yeah, it was a big step in that sense. It's more that, like I said, suddenly you need to do both, and you need to learn to let go as well, right? And but I've always been a person that thinks about the return on investment, even of my own time. And when you focus on that, it's actually quite interesting, because then in the beginning you might be doing things, but when you start evaluating, am I now the best person to do this in the company, you realize you're not. And then you will see that you start to change the work you're doing and where you are adding value as to what the business needs and what you can basically add in your position. And that has helped me a lot to keep thinking about. I stopped lots of things I was doing.
What are some of the things you stopped doing?
Well, attending a few conferences, for instance, or not this one,
of course,
but some other ones. But you really need to think, because you only have very limited time. And as a CEO, you get so many things on your plate every day that if you don't really think through that, you're going to be spending your time also on things that are not relevant. Well, and I want to add to your story that one thing I spend a lot of time as well is on talent. Because I think as a CEO, that's crucial to think, what type of talent do we need for the future? Do we have these people? How can we make them ready? And on the other side, what do we need to hire? So that's something that I also spend a lot of time doing.
All right, I think we have about 16 seconds left. So let's do one quick rapid fire. Who's one leader that each of you admire and why in like 2 seconds?
I pick Mark Zuckerberg, even if that's maybe controversial.
Controversial.
But I think he was always very visionary in the way that he was pivoting actually the model and adapt to revolution after revolution.
Okay, Jason, we gotta move.
and we're counting on him to sort out the current situation.
I was actually going to say Zuckerberg as well, but since you said him, I will say somebody else, Jeff Bezos. And I think in particular because he's transformed that company so many times and been so iterative.
Another transformation story.
Yeah, for me it was similar. Bezos, we've been following him for a long time, but mainly his vision around customers and what you need to do for customers and how he's investing constantly back into customers. I think that was also for me number one. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.